All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're going to demystify one of the world's most famous spiritual texts, the Bhagavad Gita. But we're going to look at it a bit differently, as an intensely relatable psychological survival guide. You see, for thousands of years, the Gita has been revered as a sacred scripture. But honestly, at its very core, it's an incredibly smart, timeless response to a problem humanity has always faced. What exactly do you do when a massive crisis leaves you completely, utterly paralyzed?
And that brings up a really fascinating paradox. How in the world did an ancient conversation, one happening on the very brink of a brutal war, become the literal blueprint for global peace movements? It sounds totally contradictory, right? Well, to answer that, we have to explore how a devastating, literal war transforms into a profound metaphor for the inner turmoil every single one of us deals with. But to really grasp that massive shift, we first need to look at the epic scale of the story itself.
Now, what's truly staggering is the sheer size of the Mahabharata, which is the wider epic containing the Gita. It clocks in at roughly 1.8 million words. Just to put that into perspective for you, that is about 7 times longer than the Iliad and the Odyssey put together, and roughly 12 times the length of the Bible. It's this massive, sprawling narrative packed with complex characters and deep wisdom. And nestled right in the middle of it all is the Gita, its absolute shining philosophical centerpiece.
At the heart of this giant epic is a really brutal family feud between two groups of cousins. On one side, you've got the rightful heirs, the Pandavas, representing the forces of good and dharma. On the other side are the Kauravas. They've unjustly usurped the kingdom, completely blinded by ego, greed, and attachment. The tension between these two sides has finally hit a breaking point, and war is now absolutely inevitable.
Let's set the stage with our first section, the scene from Dhritarashtra's lounge. So our explainer actually starts far away from the battlefield. We're with the physically blind King Dhritarashtra. Now, his blind attachment to his corrupt sons is exactly what caused this whole mess to begin with. Since he can't see the battle, he essentially tunes into the Sanjaya news network. He relies entirely on his trusted minister Sanjaya, who's been granted this miraculous gift called Divya Drishti, or divine vision. This basically lets Sanjaya witness distant events directly in his mind, giving the blind king live, real-time commentary of the unfolding war at Kurukshetra.
Through Sanjaya's vision, we hear how the agonizing weight on the battlefield finally just shatters. The tension breaks with the dramatic blowing of these legendary conch shells. Lord Krishna sounds the Panchajanya, Arjuna blows the Devadatta, and the mighty beam sounds the Paundra. These booming horns echo right across the plains, signaling the undeniable, violent start to this catastrophic civil war. There's literally no turning back now.
Which leads us directly into our next section, the crisis, the inner war.
This outer clash of armies suddenly triggers a catastrophic internal collapse for our hero, Arjuna. This is the exact moment the story shifts from a grand historical epic to a deeply personal psychological drama. Arjuna's chariot, driven by Lord Krishna, pulls into the space between the two massive armies in the sacred field of Kurukshetra, also known as Dharmakshetra, the realm of duty. Arjuna asks Krishna to pause. He looks across the enemy lines, and you know what he sees? He doesn't see faceless monsters. He sees his own grandfathers, his beloved teachers, his cousins, and his friends, all standing there ready to kill him.
Faced with the horrifying prospect of slaughtering his own family for a piece of land, Arjuna suffers what we today would call a full-blown visceral panic attack. His mind just reels with overwhelming sorrow. His limbs start trembling, his mouth goes totally dry, and in a moment of absolute defeat, his legendary bow, the Gandiva, just slips right out of his hands. He collapses in his chariot and tells Krishna, "I will not fight."
And this brilliantly illustrates a paradoxical question right at the heart of the text. Is it actually possible that this total emotional devastation is a spiritual stepping stone? We usually think of yoga as physical stretching or peaceful meditation, right? But the word yoga comes from the root yuj, meaning to join or unite. Arjuna's intense grief is forcing him to question his entire existence. In fact, the very first chapter of the Gita frames this total despair as Arjuna Vishad Yog, the yoga of grief. It's this powerful idea that sometimes we must be entirely emptied of our ego and our worldly identity before any true wisdom can actually enter. Arjuna's complete breakdown strips away his arrogant identity as this great, untouchable warrior. He is left totally vulnerable, and that complete surrender is the absolute prerequisite for the profound learning that's about to happen.
Moving right along to our next section, the core wisdom, Samkhya Yoga.
With Arjuna entirely surrendered and begging for help, Krishna steps in.
And he doesn't just offer a quick pep talk. Instead, he begins with Samkhya Yoga, the yoga of knowledge and analytical discernment, to fundamentally shift how Arjuna views reality itself. The mathematical symmetry here is so cool, by the way. This is a war fought over 18 days by 18 massive armies, and corresponding perfectly to that, the Gita itself is structured into 18 chapters of progressive wisdom. Krishna acts as the ultimate guide, walking Arjuna up the ladder of understanding, one careful rung at a time.
Krishna's very first major lesson hits hard. He urges Arjuna to stop lamenting for the physical body. He uses this beautiful, intuitive metaphor of simply changing your clothes to explain the eternal, imperishable nature of the soul. The physical body, which is made of material elements, is eventually going to perish. That's a fact. But the true self, the Atman, it is never born and it never dies.
Ultimately, Krishna's goal is to lead Arjuna away from the slavery of ignorance and into the freedom of true wisdom. It is all about purging those illusory thoughts, the false attachments we all have to this temporary physical world, and entering a state of pure consciousness. This state is called samadhi, a place of perfect equanimity and liberation where your ego just doesn't disturb you anymore.
Next up, 3 paths to liberation.
Now, understanding this eternal reality intellectually is one thing, but how do we actually live it? To achieve this supreme mental balance while still living in a totally chaotic world, Krishna introduces 3 interconnected paths, or margas. You have Karma Yoga, the path of selfless action, Jnana Yoga, the path of knowledge, and Bhakti Yoga, the path of active devotion. What's crucial to grasp here is that these aren't isolated little boxes where you just pick one and ignore the rest. They are progressive stages of a single unified journey. They involve our hands through action, our head through intellect, and our heart through devotion.
For someone like Arjuna, a warrior actively standing on a battlefield, Karma Yoga is particularly essential. Karma Yoga demands that we act and do our duty in the world. We can't just run away and hide in a cave somewhere. But, and this is the kicker, we must entirely surrender our attachment to the fruits, or the results, of those actions. You have a right to your labor, but not to the reward. Acting selflessly, for the greater good rather than your own personal ego, transforms everyday mundane action into a literal divine sacrifice.
And finally, our last section, a timeless global legacy.
This ancient conversation, taking place on a dusty chariot thousands of years ago, remains astonishingly relevant today, far beyond the borders of ancient India. It's become a psychological tool for humanity. Think back to our initial question about nonviolence. By stripping away the desire for personal gain and focusing entirely on selfless duty, leaders like Mahatma Gandhi used the Gita's principles in the real world. He took a text set on a literal battlefield and used its teachings of non-attachment to anchor a massive, successful nonviolent revolution. He realized that the true battle is always internal. It's against our own ego, greed, and fear.
Ultimately, the Bhagavad Gita teaches us that we all face our own inner battlefields of duty and doubt. The physical war of the Mahabharata mirrors the daily psychological wars we all have to navigate. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with something to think about. What is your Kurukshetra? What is the challenge standing right in front of you today, and how will you find your equanimity and do your duty within it?